The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining Beth and I.
Hello, everybody.
We hope all you wanderers out there are having a lovely weekend, as we are. And we have an excellent episode for all of you tonight. And it's nice to be back in the studio. It's a Sunday night for us. And we're recording a little earlier than normal because Beth and I want to go out and check out the sturgeon moon.
It was really cool last night when it came up because we weren't expecting it. It was a full moon and bright orange and came right up over the trees. And it just looked like the perfect background to a Halloween card or a spooky Halloween movie or something.
It was really cool because with the wildfires over in Canada, we've been having a lot of air quality issues, and it gets very hazy. We can't even see Vermont from our house on days like that. And last night, the smoke rolling in from the wildfires and the sturgeon moon, it was incredible. But, we have a lot of light pollution here. So Beth and I thought that after this episode is recorded tonight, that we're going to head out into the rural areas of Clinton County, New York, to one of our favorite spots, a campground that's not too far away, and there's absolutely no light pollution out there. So that mood should be really majestic.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm sure many of you wanderers out there have probably seen it and know what we're talking about. I don't know if you're affected by the wildfires at all, coming from Canada, but a lot of us in New York State are. So it definitely makes a great backdrop for this sturgeon moon. It makes it very eerie.
Unfortunately, since there's wildfires in Canada.
Tonight would be a great night to go out, walk among the corn stalks.
Oh, yeah. It's too hot for that. We have to wait till fall. We can be patient.
I know. It's been in the 90s. Now, I know for some of you that's not that hot, but ugh.
That pretty much sums it up right there.
Yeah, ugh. Well, with that said, we're going to get on our way. No housekeeping tonight.
No.
No.
That's all right.
So, sit back, get comfy, do what you got to do, and Beth's going to get us started.
Yeah, so my story tonight is a little different from what we usually do because it's actually not supernatural in any way. And I'm just going to say that up front. There are no supernatural elements. But this story is pretty incredible. And so I wanted to share it with everybody. So to start off, I want you to imagine being in your 30s or 40s, getting on a sailboat, and then sailing around the world totally by yourself. Is that something that you would do?
Absolutely not. I don't like the water all that much.
So you'd be, yeah, that would be a problem.
Yeah, I like to fish, I like to boat, but I wouldn't want to be out for that amount of time.
No, and besides all of the weather issues like storms and the possibility of getting hurt with nobody around to help you, there's also the possibility of, loneliness during those years that you would spend out at sea. So now imagine that you're only 16, and it's the beginning of 1965. In a nutshell, the Vietnam War is escalating in a huge way. Malcolm X has been killed. Martin Luther King Jr. completed his 4-day march from Selma to Montgomery. NASA had its first successful manned launch into orbit. U.S. troops were occupying the Dominican Republic. Muhammad Ali knocked out Sonny Liston. The Indo-Pakistani War began, and the Voting Rights Act was signed into law. All of that happened within the first 6 to 8 months of 1965.
I don't know. I was only 2 years old.
There was a lot going on.
There was a lot.
Okay. So Robin Lee Graham, who was just 16 years old, boarded a 24-foot sloop in California without any company except for 2 cats, and he set sail, planning to circumnavigate the globe. And that's what I decided to tell everybody about tonight, the amazing story of Robin Lee Graham.
And how we got rid of all that kitty litter that he would have had to have with him?
How do you do that?
I guess you train them to put their butts overboard and do their business.
But that's such a good question that I never would have thought of, and I don't think anybody's ever asked him.
Maybe you just outreach your arms.
Dangle the cat over the side.
Right.
So when Robin was 13, his father sold their family home and business and bought a 35-foot ketch. Then they sailed the Pacific. Robin absolutely loved it, and when the family returned to Honolulu and their regular life, Robin's heart was pretty much still at sea. At age 15, according to allthat'sinteresting.com, Robin and 2 of his friends pooled their money together to buy a tiny aluminum lifeboat that was caulked with chewing gum.
Oh, my.
The 3 of them wanted to sail from Honolulu to Lanai, which is a distance of about 63 nautical miles or 73 miles by air. So they left their parents a note saying what they were up to, hopped into their tiny metal boat, and took off. Except the weather turned out not to be so great. They sailed right into a storm, and their understandably panicked parents called the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard sent out a search party, but they couldn't find the boys or the boat, and everyone assumed that the 3 boys had drowned. But then a phone call came from a police station on Lanai. The boys had actually made it. Now, you'd think that after the initial relief over finding their son safe, the Grahams would have instituted some sort of punishment. But instead, Robin's father, Lyle, made a major decision. He bought Robin a Lapshore 24 sloop, fitted for offshore voyages. When asked why, Lyle Graham said he'd figured that Robin was just going to do it again, so it'd be much safer if he was in a decent boat.
Well, I can see that as a parent. Who wants their kid going out to sea with bubblegum patching things?
I know. It's not as good as duct tape.
Not at all.
Well, it turns out his dad was right. Robin definitely headed back out to sea. They'd purchased the sloop in California, and Robin wanted to sail it solo back to Hawaii. His parents agreed, and on the way back, Robin decided that he just wanted to keep going. After a lot of preparation, Robin sailed the sloop, which he'd named the Dove, back to San Pedro, California. And on July 27th, 1965, 16-year-old Robin began his attempt to circumnavigate the globe. He had 2 cats on board, named Joliet and Suzette, and throughout his 30,000-mile journey, he always had at least 3 cats on board with him. Within 2 weeks, he'd made it to Fanning Island, a British-controlled atoll. He'd planned to sail the 1,500 miles to Pago Pago in American Samoa, but a fierce storm took out his mast. He changed course and made it to Western Samoa instead, where he was able to repair the Dove and then sail to Pago Pago, where he waited 5 months for hurricane season to end.
And this kid's only 16 years old.
16.
He's got some balls on him.
I know. In May of 1966, he headed for Fiji, stopping at various islands along the way. When he landed in Fiji, he met a pretty incredible young woman named Patty. Patty was 22 years old and had lived a vagabond's life for months. She'd hitchhiked from California to Panama and then the Galapagos and Tahiti before finding herself in Fiji. She'd hitched a ride on a 65-foot Swedish schooner with a captain who only gave his crew meager food, while he and his girlfriend hoarded the rest of the food in their cabin. Patty made it to Fiji unscathed, although she'd eaten nothing but a small portion of tinned canned beef for weeks. Her ultimate goal was to make it to Australia, where she hoped the men would be better.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine?
I can't imagine doing it now, let alone at 22.
No.
So during her pit stop in Fiji, she found work on a cruise boat, and she started to hear stories about this teenager moored on the other side of the island. They ended up meeting through mutual friends, and before long, Patty and Robin were in love.
And the 3 cats.
Well, yeah. It wasn't the same 3 cats throughout his whole journey. It was different cats.
What did he do? Use them for bait?
No, but I'm sure when they went through all the different storms and the terrible things that he went through, that they may have been lost at sea, some of these cats.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
It's sad. But I wasn't going to mention it, but you brought it up, so.
Well, you're welcome.
Okay. According to Sail magazine, their relationship caused some problems, though. National Geographic was funding a good chunk of Robin's voyage, running articles on him every few months. Now, none of the sites that I looked at spelled out exactly what National Geographic's problem was with Patty, but I assume it was something to the effect that they were funding the trip as a solo trip. And if Patty joined Robin on board, it wasn't a solo trip anymore. So I'm assuming the relationship was discouraged by the magazine. That didn't stop the couple from being together, though.
Well, he's 16 years old. Hormones are running and you're at sea all that time by yourself. Yeah, and all you're doing is looking at your same 3 cats all the time. A little lass would be nice on board. I'm not just talking about cooking and cleaning and doing things like that. I mean,
a little
some
lass?
Is comfort would be nice.
What you just said? A little lass?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Isn't that like ship talk? Pirate talk, maybe? No. What do I know? I've only watched Pirates of the Caribbean. It's about as much as I know about sailing.
Robin continued to sail solo, and Patty traveled by other means to meet him in as many ports as she could. On October 22nd, Robin and the Dove set sail for the New Hebrides, and a month later he had made it to Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. Then, on March 24th, 1967, Robin made landfall in New Guinea. Now, think about that. Like you just said, he was 16 or 17 years old, and he was out at sea alone, not for weeks, for months.
I know. It must have made his parents really proud.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, he's a young man, 16, 17 years old. I mean, if this kid can pull this off, he's going to be set for the rest of his life. This kid's got what it takes to make it.
This is true, but there was also a lot of pressure, according to what I read, a lot of pressure from National Geographic and a lot of pressure from his father to complete the journey. So he left New Guinea on April 18th and arrived in Australia on May 4th. The Pacific leg of his journey was done. When he left Australia 2 months later, he traveled 1,900 nautical miles in just 18 days to reach the Cocos Islands. But then another massive storm blew in, and the poor Dove was dismasted in the storm. This was the first time during his entire voyage where Robin admitted to being scared. According to Sail magazine, Robin estimated that the waves were 30 feet tall. Knocking one of his port lights in and his companionway door had split apart. After exhausting himself making in-the-moment desperate repairs, he prayed and then fell asleep. He awoke to calm seas. Sailing under nothing but a jury rig, Robin made it the 2,300 miles to Mauritius off the coast of East Africa. He reached South Africa, another 1,450 miles, by October 21st. And there, Patty was waiting. The couple spent 9 months in South Africa, visiting all different cities. And once Robin received written permission from his parents, since he was still a minor, Patty and Robin got married. They spent their honeymoon in Kruger National Park. Patty wrote a 12-page letter to Robin's parents detailing all the things that they saw. Robin left Cape Town on July 13, 1968, for the longest stretch of his journey. He said in National Geographic that his 2 months alone at sea were difficult because of the crushing monotony and loneliness. He said, quote, "Each day was like the next. Loneliness began to take hold of me like a pain that wouldn't go away. I fought it every way I could. You have to, or it will drive you crazy." 6 weeks later, he arrived in Suriname in South America. In October, he and the Dove sailed together for the last time to Barbados. It was there that he picked up a new boat, the Return of Dove, a 33-foot Allied looters sloop. The Dove continued to sail under new owners until 1989, when she sank during Hurricane Hugo. By January, Robin was sailing through the Panama Canal, and on April 30th, 1970, 5 years after he'd started, Robin reached Long Beach, California. He'd done it. It took 1,739 days, but he'd done it. He was the youngest person to ever sail solo around the globe, all 30,600 miles of it.
So was this kid still in school, or did he give up his education to sail?
I would assume he gave up his education. That's not a question I know the answer to, but I would assume he did.
Well, I guess he could get his GED.
Yeah. I mean, it was 1965.
Right.
Right? When Robin arrived in California, he never expected the media frenzy that awaited him. National Geographic had featured him on their cover 3 times. Ford Motor Company gave the young couple who were expecting their first child a 1970 Ford Maverick. Both Robin and Patty were awarded full scholarships to Stanford University, and Hollywood wanted his story. They tried college life for a semester, but with a newborn and adjusting to life back on land, plus all the constant media attention, well, the couple decided that it just wasn't what they wanted. So they sold the Maverick and bought a retired postal van. They traveled to Montana, where they built a log home. A few years later, they moved closer to the city of Kalispell and built a bigger log home, and they've been there ever since. They aren't fancy. As Robin once said, quote, "At sea, I learned how little a person needs, not how much." And yes, 76-year-old Robin still sails. He just stays closer to home. As for the return of Dove, it's believed that she's still seaworthy and is owned by someone in Hawaii. It's an incredible story. I mean, basically, it's a love story on 2 levels. First, it's one man's love of the sea, but even more so, it's a love story about Robin and Patty. In the last few decades, 2 young women tried to break Robin's record of being the youngest to circumnavigate the globe. The first was Australian teenager Jessica Watson, who, at age 16, did sail around the world in 2009. However, she encountered several problems, including terrible weather and a collision with another boat. At the end of her journey, it was decided that she had fallen short of the minimum mileage considered to be a true circumnavigation, so her journey didn't count as a record. The second was Laura Decker, but it was 2010, not 1965, and the Dutch government became involved, concerned for her welfare. They deeply opposed her proposed trip and insisted on several safety precautions before they'd allow her to undertake such a voyage. Plus, several of the ports that she'd planned to stop at had laws against anyone under a certain age captaining their own ship. Decker departed Gibraltar on August 21, 2010, and arrived in Simpson Bay, St. Martin, on January 21, 2012. She'd sailed solo for 27,000 miles over the span of 518 days at age 16 and 123 days.
It's pretty incredible.
It is incredible. I remember the whole hullabaloo before she was allowed to go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand it. But, let kids be kids. Let them go for it.
let kids be kids. You let a 16-year-old get into a little boat and just take off into the ocean and sail around the world all by themselves?
Well, you know what? I look at it this way. More than likely, somebody like that has grown up on the water with their parents.
Well, that's true.
And they know what they're doing. They're not just willy-nilly getting into a boat they just bought at Dick's Sporting Goods or Gander Mountain or something like that.
That's true.
And then taking off.
Right.
These kids already had their sea legs.
Right.
But of course the government would have to step in and say, well, we don't approve of this.
Right.
To me, that's bullshit.
She did it, though.
She did do it.
Yes.
Good for her.
Yes.
I love this story.
I know. It's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. I can't believe they gave him a Ford Maverick after all that. Oh my God, they could have bought him each at least a Mustang or something. Actually, people like that, they should have got both VW buses.
Oh, I know.
That would have been perfect for them.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like they're both still living a great life.
I think so.
And after something like that, could you really, just settle down to a 3-bedroom home or something like that and,
And
in the city?
Do the 9 to 5?
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's in either of their natures to be that way.
I think at a young age, they already knew where they wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be right back after this quick break.
Hey, did you know? In 1914, 4-year-old Mary Piersdorf went to visit her grandparents in Lewiston. But Mary didn't travel by train or automobile. Hoping to save some money, Mary's parents brought her down to the Grangeville, Idaho post office, paid the going rate for mailing chickens, and hoped Mary came in under the maximum weight of 50 pounds. She did, just barely. And so Mary's parents pinned the 53-cent receipt to her coat, loaded her into the baggage car, and sent their child to her grandparents by parcel post. Not wanting to leave Mary unattended in the post office overnight in Lewiston, the good-hearted postmaster hand-delivered her to her grandparents' house. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we're back from the break. And for my story tonight, I'm going to tell everyone about the Bobby Dunbar case of 1912, and it's a true mystery. It includes possible kidnapping, mistaken identity, and wrongful incarceration. But what makes this missing child case so intriguing is that Bobby Dunbar was found alive and well, except for the fact that the child everyone called Bobby was really a child named Bruce Anderson. Well, maybe. So, if you haven't already, get comfy, and let's get into the twisty and wild story of Bobby Dunbar. On August 23, 1912, Percy and Leslie Dunbar brought their 2 sons on a camping trip at Swayze Lake, Louisiana. Bobby, who was their oldest child, was only 4 years old at the time. Sometime during their very first night at the lake, little Bobby went missing. His parents were frantic, and they searched everywhere they could think of. When they still couldn't find him, they called the police. According to CountryRoadsMagazine.com, the initial search party tracked Bobby to the lakeside and determined that it was likely that he had drowned. In order to find his remains, they caught and dissected alligators and even threw dynamite into the lake, hoping to bring up his body. However, when they discovered his hat some distance away from the lake, speculation soon turned to the thought that perhaps Bobby had been kidnapped. Now, the investigation went statewide, and the Dunbars offered a $6,000 reward, which in today's money would be around $160,000. 8 months went by, and not a single lead. But then, one day, the Dunbars received a phone call that filled them with hope. A little boy matching Bobby's description had been spotted near Columbia, Mississippi. A handyman and wandering peddler named William Cantwell Walters had been seen with a little boy for months. Police swooped in and arrested Walters for kidnapping on April 13th, 1913. Now, Walters insisted that the little boy with him was his brother's son and that the boy's name was Bruce Anderson. Even though the child's parents weren't married, he had agreed to babysit his nephew for a few weeks, while Bruce's mother, Julia, went out of town to try and find work. Those few weeks had turned into months, but he was still looking after the boy. Several of the townsfolk confirmed that Walters was telling the truth. Meanwhile, Percy and Leslie Dunbar had arrived in Mississippi. The very first time they were reunited with the child, he was asleep. And here's where it gets interesting. Newspapers all over the country covered the reunion, and they each had vastly different takes on how the reunion went. Some newspapers claimed that the child opened his eyes and immediately reached out for Leslie, crying, "Mother." Others reported that when the child opened his eyes, he burst into tears and Leslie stood there, unsure of whether the boy was actually her son Bobby. They quoted her as saying, "I do not know. I am not quite sure." Percy Dunbar allegedly remarked that the child's eyes appeared smaller than Bobby's had been. Regardless, the Mississippi authorities allowed the Dunbars to take the child. The newly reunited family went to a hotel, where Leslie gave the little boy a bath. The following day, when they all returned to the police station, she claimed that while bathing him, she had recognized some moles and scars, and now she knew for certain that the child was her son, Bobby. All they had to do was convince a judge, and they could bring him home to Louisiana. According to a 2018 DailyWorld.com article, at some point, the Dunbars were allowed to bring the child to New Orleans to meet with Mr. John M. Parker. Parker was a politician who later became governor of Louisiana. They asked Parker, who was a family friend, to examine the child and determine whether he thought that the child was Bobby. He said he had no doubt that he was. Meanwhile, a newspaper offered to pay for Julia Anderson to come to Mississippi and claim her lost child, Bruce. Her story was slightly different from Walter's. She agreed that, yes, she had left Bruce with Walters for a few days. Walters was visiting his sister, and she needed to look for work. But when she'd come back home, Walters and Bruce were gone. Walters, on the other hand, insisted that Anderson hadn't come back after a few days at all, and that he was pretty much forced to take Bruce with him because he felt responsible for him. The police were willing to listen to Julia Anderson's story, and they brought in 5 boys, one by one, for her to talk to. 4 of the boys were just random kids, but the 5th was Bruce. She was not able to pick out which one was her son, and none of the 5 boys claimed to know her. The next day, just like Leslie Dunbar, Julia Anderson came back to the station and claimed that Bobby was Bruce, or that Bruce was Bruce. Now, both families were claiming that the same child was their missing son. Now, to be fair, in all honesty, Bobby Dunbar and Bruce Anderson did look a heck of a lot alike. The newspapers were quick to jump on Julia Anderson, though. First, they questioned her morals by pointing out that she had 3 children by 3 men, and she hadn't married any of them. 2 of those 3 children had died. Plus, they questioned why Julia had never reported Bruce as missing. One New Orleans newspaper even had this to say: "Animals don't forget, but this big coarse countrywoman, several times a mother, she forgot." End quote. It's interesting that none of the papers said anything remotely like that about Leslie Dunbar, even though she'd also questioned if the little boy was actually her child. According to the Daily World article, there were a lot of misconceptions about Julia Anderson. First, her full name was Julia Anderson Floyd. She actually had been married for a little while, and they had a daughter, so the papers got that wrong. Second, she was divorced in 1908, when Bruce was born, and her 3rd child died in infancy. Both Bruce and this younger baby's father was a younger brother of William Cantwell Walters. So her 3 children didn't have 3 different fathers, and only one of them had passed away, not 2. The authorities themselves seemed to doubt her story, and because she wasn't financially well off, she couldn't afford a long custody trial. And so a judge determined that the little boy was Bobby Dunbar. And they sent him home to Louisiana with Percy and Leslie Their hometown threw him a welcome home parade. Life for Bobby Dunbar went on from there. At first, he and Leslie were asked to be special guests at all kinds of parades and social events. Eventually, though, Percy and Leslie got divorced. But Bobby grew up, got married, and had his own family. Bobby passed away in 1966. But things for William Cantwell Walters, the man accused of kidnapping him, weren't so great. Despite Julia Anderson testifying that Walters did not kidnap her son Bruce, and a lot of support from locals who swore under oath that Walters and Bruce had been together for months before Bobby Dunbar went missing, the court decided to extradite him to Louisiana to face the kidnapping charges. The Louisiana jury found Walters guilty of kidnapping. He spent 2 years in prison until he won an appeal and his conviction was overturned. As for Julia Anderson, she moved to the Mississippi town of Poplarville, got married, and had 7 more children. She became a devout Christian, helped found a church, and found work as a nurse and midwife. But for the rest of her life, she considered the Dunbars the true kidnappers of her son Bruce. Julia Anderson passed away on February 1st, 1940. And this is where our story would normally end, wondering whatever happened to Bruce Anderson and if William Cantwell Walters really was a kidnapper who had harmed him in some sort of way. But that's not how this story goes. In 1993, some 30-plus years after Bobby Dunbar passed away, a descendant of Bobby's decided to get to the bottom of it all. Margaret Dunbar Cutright, his granddaughter, hoped to prove once and for all that Bobby was truly her grandfather. After extensive research, she came to an unsettling conclusion. She didn't think that he was. As you can imagine, this caused a major rift with the Dunbar family. In 2004, Margaret convinced her father, Robert Dunbar Jr., to do a DNA test. They would simply compare his DNA to his cousin's. Since their fathers were siblings, it should match and end the mystery once and for all. But it turns out Bobby Dunbar was not Bobby Dunbar, but there was also not enough conclusive evidence to prove that he was Bruce Anderson either. So, how's that for a twist?
So, the little boy wasn't either of those little boys?
No, not as far as we know.
I mean, it's inconclusive that he was
Right.
Bruce.
Right.
Right? So he could have been.
He could have been.
But he definitely wasn't Bobby.
No, that's why it's a mystery.
But the Dunbars brought him home and raised him as their kid.
Right, well, sometimes the courts get it wrong.
So if he really was Bruce, then
He missed out.
his mother was right.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Now, most of the articles online say that the little boy was Bruce Anderson, although none of them say that the DNA proved that fact. They only say that the DNA proved that he wasn't Bobby Dunbar. So yes, despite the general belief that he was actually Bruce, there's no actual confirmation of that fact, at least not that I could find.
Wow.
But more than that, we still don't know what happened to the real Bobby Dunbar. Did he drown in water? Did an alligator grab him? It's a 113-year-old mystery.
Wow.
I know.
I'm like speechless. Mind blown.
Well, that's that's kind of one of the modern day miracles of medicine, right? DNA testing.
Right.
We can find out a lot more than we could back then. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's
And-
too bad because, I'm sure Bobby Dunbar isn't the only one. There had to be hundreds and hundreds of cases like this, probably thousands across the world.
Right. Well, I feel bad for Walters, too. I mean, he went to prison for kidnapping Bobby Dunbar
Right.
when it wasn't even really him.
No, not at all. And thank God for DNA testing, because there's many people sitting in prisons that actually didn't commit crimes and have been pardoned now.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's incredible.
It is.
Well, as always, if you'd like to know more about tonight's episode, you can always check out our show notes. Beth always posts them.
Yes, the sources are always in there. And you put a picture, a comparison picture of Bobby Dunbar and Bruce Anderson on our Facebook page, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. They do look a lot alike.
They do look a lot alike.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you want to check that out, head over to our Facebook page, Where Our Minds Wander, and check it out for yourself. See what you think.
Yeah.
Well, that about wraps it up for this episode, Beth.
Yes.
Join us next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.